Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. And this week we're going to go back to something I talked about several months ago, and that was comparing my high-end standard, the Pioneer, against the other big dogs in my collection. And we're going to start off with the Thiel. Stick around. Alright, so I think this is going to be pretty interesting. So many months ago, I decided that the poor large Advent that I've been using as my baseline for larger speakers was just getting outmatched. So I decided for higher end speakers to use my Pioneer TZ9 as my new reference speaker and baseline speaker for higher end comparisons and reviews. Although I've done a review of each of these, I'm going to start going forward now with all the higher end speakers I have and periodically bring them out and do a head-to-head comparison against the TZ9. So everything gets sort of reset now as far as those valuations are concerned, and we're going to start off with this set here. Since I've already done an individual review of them in the past, if you want to go see those, you can look them up and go back and see the full review. But I'm going to reference some of that information to give you an overview now of each of these, so you understand what kind of configuration they have, a little bit about the baseline metrics for them. And then, as I always do, I'm going to give you some close-up shots, see how good they look, and then come back at the end and go through the ratings and the head-to-head comparison that I've been doing all week. It's been a very, very interesting week, I can tell you. So stick around. I think you'll be quite interested in the results. All right, well, this is the Thiel, or Thiel, however you wish to say it, CS7. Now the CS7 precedes the CS7.2, and I stress that because there's a ton of information out there about the 7.2, which came out in 2000 versus the 7. 7 was the top of the line. It was $8,900 in '99, so not an inexpensive speaker at all, and would be expensive today, was very expensive back then. So the one thing about this particular line, there was a CS7, a 6, a 5, and a 3, I believe. And they were made with a concrete baffle. So extremely non-resonant and extremely heavy. These are the heaviest speakers that I own right now. These come in at 201 pounds, and let me tell you, I feel every bit of it every time I try to move them. The front grill is also interesting in how it comes off. I'll explain it and then I'll take the grill off, but to take it off, this is actually very loose. The fabric is loose because it stretches over the baffle, so to give it the shape. So you have to actually pull it out from the bottom first, and then it lifts up. There are two inserts here about 4 inches in that it slots into, and then it pops into the bottom. So I'll take this off and then let you see what it looks like. So here it is. It's pretty cool, huh? So this is inserted into the concrete baffle, and let me tell you that when you're moving these things around, it absolutely feels like a solid piece of concrete. There is just nothing in this that feels like you can, there's any resonance anywhere on it. It's not hollow. It just doesn't feel hollow anywhere on this thing. But what an amazing sort of implementation of, this, in this case, a teak and, industrial design here. Has that sort of, to me, very futuristic look to it. Ridley Scott comes to mind a little bit. Love these, the way it angles in here. And, it's sort of phased. It's got the slant here to phase the different drivers. And I think it just, just to me, talks about Thiel's design engineering skill. This was their style throughout, and looks like a Thiel speaker. You can identify them. Thiel came out around early 80s, I think 81 is when they started their line, and were very successful, very highly regarded speaker company. Unfortunately, they went out of business after I think it was Peter Thiel passed away. But all of their speakers have a good following, and I was lucky enough to pick this set up from the original owner, and very excited to have them. Again, this is a teak finish, which is a custom finish. I think there were rosewood and some others that were the standard finishes, but the teak was a custom finish on them. So I will come back now and give you some good shots of what it looks like, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you how they sound. The Pioneer TZ9. Had you heard of it before? If you had, you knew more about them than I did. When I found them at an estate sale several years ago, I had no clue what they were. I walked in, saw them, was quite surprised. It had the Pioneer name on it, and had no clue that they had ever released this model. So these were engineered by the Pioneer TAD group, the Technical Audio Devices engineering team of Pioneer. They typically develop their professional series line, but they did not retain that the tag. They actually were still released as the Pioneer Elite. Some different things about them. Well, first off, they're a substantial speaker. They're about 4 feet tall. They weigh, which is about 120 centimeters. They are 145 pounds, which is around 65 kilograms. So not a small speaker. You're not gonna just lift it up and move it around by hand unless you're pretty substantial yourself. But not something I'm going to do. They had some exotic materials. They have a ceramic graphite material for the mid-range and the tweeter. As well, the tweeter is mid-mounted, if you'll notice here, and that was to lower it and keep it sort of closer at the ear level when you're seated. Has dual woofers, a front firing and rear firing, and they are internally connected, just in the same way as a KEF 1042 is done. So it's similar to that effect. And then dual ported. So they made them from 90 to around 96. It, for the most part, only came in this oak finish, except for 1 year. They actually made a piano black gloss finish, and I happen to have a pair. So as rare as they are, I've been lucky enough to run across 2 pair, one of the more common, but still not common, oak finish, and then the even more rare black finish. So at some point, I will get them set up side by side and do a comparison.
Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna let it rain. Tonight, we gonna let it rain. Tonight, we gonna let it rain. Just like the sunrise, we gonna let it rain. Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna let it rain. Tonight, we gonna
All right, well, I told you they were good-looking speakers. You got to see them up close again. If you want to get the full review and some of the other details, go see the full reviews that are out there. Just do a quick search on the channel and you can go back and find them. Search for the TZ9 and that'll come up, and then search for just Thiel on this side and you'll find that review as well. So I spent a large amount of time this week, every day this week, every evening. I was out here moving these around in all sorts of positions. I had them on the, each speaker on the inside, each speaker on the outside, rotated them around, towed them in, towed them out. Just about every place I could move them to, I did. And I just wanted to give them equal opportunity to shine and get them in the best listening position. Now, when I'm A-Bing things, I'm literally switching back and forth on the same song because I want to hear that difference. I personally don't believe that our audible memory is very lasting. And so I prefer to make sure I'm hearing it as close to real time as I can, and switching back and forth because I want to compare those sort of nuanced notes and playback as best as I can. So I wanted to make sure that each of them gets ample time to be in their best position. It took me a while to sort of figure that out with them being in close proximity. But I think I got there. It was a heck of a shootout. It was fun. I'll tell you, it's a lot more challenging when you get to a speaker at, speakers at this level. They're both equally, they're just great speakers, both of them. And when you get to a higher end speaker, they perform very well, and there are some just nuances to things. Anyone would be happy with either of these. I just want to say that up front, but I did want to take the time to try and articulate the differences that I'm hearing between the two. So let's get into it a bit. So this is the Pioneer TZ9. And if you don't recall, if you haven't seen prior videos, prior to this particular video that starts off, I'll say, my higher end comparisons, my head-to-head comparisons, all of my mid-sized to larger speakers, I was comparing to my mid-sized speaker baseline, the Advent. Now, it seems obvious that the Advent was being far outgunned with a speaker of this size and quality, but I had to start somewhere. So before I accumulated quite a few larger, higher end speakers, that was my baseline, and that's the way I compared them. Both of these at the time were compared to an Advent, believe it or not. But now it's time to up the game a bit, and I'm going forward. This is my baseline for all, I'll say, higher end speakers. So the TZ9 is not so common. It's a fairly rare speaker, and they were manufactured around 1990 to 96. If you're not familiar with them, they were originally developed by the Pioneer TAD group. They were not marketed as TAD. They were marketed under the Elite name. They were $4,000 a pair at that time, and not sold in huge quantities. For 1 year, they came out, this is an oak finish, and for 1 year, they actually came out with a piano black finish. And I happen to have a pair of those as well. And at some point in the near future, I'm going to put them head to head and see if there's any differences. What I also have, which is equally or more rare than anything else probably, is an acrylic model. I didn't know until maybe 7-8 months ago that they made an acrylic model. Just like the Pioneer HPM 100 that I think a lot of us have seen, they made these acrylic see-through models for in-store displays to show you how they were put together. And they made a set, or made them also for the TZ9. And I have a single, I have one. It's in rough shape, but I think it'll clean up fairly nicely, and we can take a look at it. So I'm going to do some more follow-up and do another review of the TZ9 with the black piano finish model, and show you that acrylic one as well. The Thiel speaker, made a little bit later. I think it was, I have to go back and look actually. I think it was 96 to 99. And these were retailing for around $9,000. So not, an inexpensive speaker. It was about twice as much, as the Pioneer, but this was the top of the line speaker for Thiel at the time in the 7, and it's an outstanding speaker. I will just tell you, it is. I'm going to probably say it several times, but it's heavy as a rock, literally, and just a well-regarded speaker. So now going forward, I'm going to do these head-to-head battles and try to pick a winner, as tough as that is going to be. So let's kick it off with style. Well, let's look at the Pioneer first. So the Pioneer, nice looking speaker, reminds me of the Yamaha NS1000 a bit, in that what's cool about them are the unique drivers here. Some exotic materials, and it kind of makes you want to see them and run them grillless and show off the cool drivers. But after that, it's really a fairly basic, standard, rectangular cabinet. On top of that, it is encased in an oak veneer, and to me that is a little dated. Now, like I mentioned before, I do have the piano black models, which I think would bring it up a notch, but in this particular model, to me they just look a little dated. So they get a 14 for their style. Now contrast that to the Thiel. I think these still look very modern. I think these things could be released today and would look still contemporary. They have these cool angular, front top here, the sloped side angle. The drivers, to me, still look a bit futuristic. Even though this is a 25-year-old speaker now, I think it still looks stellar. Part of my rating has typically included things like ease of putting it into a room and things like that. And I still think that's part of it because, we do have to move them around. And these, I can tell you, are extremely heavy, and they're a challenge to move around. Now, the good thing about larger speakers and higher end speakers, once you get them in place, it's not something you need to keep adjusting. It takes some effort to get them there, but once you do, you don't really want them to move. So being heavy is a benefit. However, it's still a factor that I think I'm going to consider, but a little bit less so. So for all those reasons, I think the Thiel is a good bit better looking than the Pioneer. So I'm giving it a 16 for points over the Pioneer. Now on to imaging and soundstage. So I've rated the Pioneers before, and they do very well. I've mentioned it in the first review. I also mentioned it in the review against the Tannoys, but they do an excellent job of imaging. If you put them apart, they have a fantastic soundstage, and it's very broad. Again, you don't want to put these in a small room, but give them some space and they'll absolutely give you a great soundstage. But it's different from the Thiel. So for the rating here, because I like it so much, I've given it an 18. But on the Thiel, it's still big, but it's even bigger than the Pioneer, because on the Thiel, the soundstage actually starts with the speaker itself, and I find that to be a little bit unusual. Every other speaker I've had, the soundstage is in between them, but for the Thiel, it sort of becomes an instrument itself, and some of the music information comes from the speaker, and it's obvious, but it's not in a strange way. It feels like it is an instrument that's in the band or in the orchestra. It feels natural. And for that reason, I think it's just a little bit better than the Pioneer. There's a little bit more musicality there. There's a little bit more airiness to the instruments. They're both good, but I give it a notch up for the Thiel. And so for that, I give it a 19, which is darn close to perfect. So that is, I think, a pretty big step up in regard to all the sound stages I've heard. Now, I've only got one more level to go on a speaker, and I'm going to review that one soon on the best sound stage I've ever heard. But at this point, the Thiel is right up there, knocking on the door. So it gets a 19 for soundstage. Now on to the lows. They both do a great job at lows on the low side. The Pioneer, it's ported, it has two woofers, has a front firing and rear firing, and it puts out quite a bit of low end. But it's different because it's ported. It's a little bit boomier. It's still great, still very good, and I don't really feel the need for a sub, but it's just different, and it's that little bit of boominess is quite different than the low end you get on the Thiel. The Thiel is very controlled and a very substantial low end. I find it quite satisfying. In fact, I find it a little more satisfying. I don't like, I don't want to say I don't like, I just more prefer the tightness of the sealed enclosure here on the Thiel. And you have to, by the way, that reminds me of mentioning, because I didn't really mention it much in the first review, is that the Thiel here is quite a demanding speaker. And it does require a pretty significant amp to go with it. I tend to think of things this way. If you are going to spend originally $10,000, $9,000 on a set of speakers, then you need to buy an amp that is fairly equivalent to that. And if you were to do that, you would have had an amp that can handle these speakers. So in the used market, because of course they sell for much less, you still need to think about getting a very hefty amp, to drive certain speakers. These are not as bad as, say, an Infinity or maybe some Magnepans, but they do need a sufficient amp that can be, stable. I'd say get one down stable to 2 ohm, just so you don't have to think about it. You just, have no issue. But give them plenty of power, and there's substantial low end here, and it's very tight, and it's very satisfying. So for that, I ended up giving it another point. The Pioneer gets a 17, and the Thiel gets an 18. Now on to the mids. This is where I spent also a significant amount of time. Just like on Soundstage, I spent a lot of time going back and forth, trying this song, trying that song, doing all sorts of things. And the reason I kept doing that is because I was trying to pick a winner. I absolutely love the mid here on the Pioneer. It just exudes a smoothness, and the sound, the singer is right out front where I like it to be. The Thiel, although it's a coaxial here, it's seamless. The mids are just seamless into the rest of the drivers here, and I love it as well. In the end, I couldn't pick a winner. I absolutely couldn't. I really went back and forth, trying to find something that the other one did better than the other. And in the end, I liked them both. I gave them both a 17. I just couldn't pick a winner here. And it was the whole of every category, it's the one I sort of fretted over the most, just because I wanted to very much decide one or the other, and I just simply couldn't do it. So they both get the same score here. On to the highs. So the highs were an area where it was noticeably different. If you've watched other reviews, I'm not one who likes, I'll say, very bright speakers at all. I was rather harsh on the Yamaha NS1000 for that reason. I'm not a huge fan of some of the metal domed JBL drivers, tweeters, and I find them a bit bright. These are brighter than the Thiels, but they're not bright. So I like them both, but if I had to describe which one, how they're different, the tweeter for this has a little more, crispness to it, but not in the way that an NS1000 is at all. So that was the differentiator. These are more rolled off. The tweeter here is more rolled off, and I kind of, to be honest, if I had to say which one I liked more, I probably would say the Thiel. But it wasn't about just saying which one I liked more, it's which one I thought, defined the rating here for tweeter, and I felt like this tweeter was just doing a little bit more in that area. And believe me, I kind of struggled with this too. It's a bit nuanced here, but I kind of leaned and gave an extra point to the Pioneer than I did over the Thiel. But it was pretty tough because one of them I can say, some people might say this is a little bit more accurate. Others might say this is just more pleasing. And so, I think both of those perspectives can be right in, for each person. So that's where some of the subjectiveness comes in. So I ended up giving the Pioneer an 18 and the Thiel a 17 on the highs. So when we look at the totals, we come up with an 84 for the Pioneer and an 87 for the Thiel. As you can see, each of them sort of went a different way for different areas, but they're very close, and I can't say that you're absolutely going to love this one much more than this one or vice versa. It all comes down to personal preference, which it always typically does. Everyone says when you go pick a set of speakers, you should go hear them. And I think that's just what everybody should do if possible. And for me, I always suggest too, find your speakers locally. I can't imagine trying to ship these. They are so heavy, so incredibly difficult to move around. And the front here, I do have the original boxes, but even with the original boxes, I would find it pretty challenging to imagine any shipping company can get them to you safely. They just have to be handled very delicately because of their heft. Now, if I were to very heavily pack them, strap them to a pallet, ensure that they only got lifted by a forklift, yeah, perhaps I'm sure they could get there okay. But that would be, I think, the only way that you could have somebody ship them to you door to door and make sure they got any other, trying to ship them in two separate boxes, forget it. Go pick them up yourself if at all possible. Take a friend because, again, they're extremely heavy. Now, I do move everything by myself for the most part. I use a dolly. These, when I pick them up, I very carefully got them. I have an SUV and I put them in my SUV. I pat everything down and then, very delicately lift them and slide them in. And that can certainly be done. If you, feel confident in your ability to move stuff around, they can be moved by yourself. I don't want to say that no one can do it because I do it, but just know that they are heavy and you need to prep accordingly. I think that's what I want to point out and make sure you get them yourself. It kills me when I see great pieces of audio get damaged in transit. It just kills me and I hate to see that, which is why I always say I pick everything up myself, and I've driven thousands of miles to do that, but I'm a bit of an exception. So. On the Pioneers, they're both hard to find. I don't think that they sold either of these in great quantities. I happen to have gotten lucky and found a couple of sets. Again, I happen to know someone who reached out to me who bought a set of these and had them shipped. And unfortunately, the shipper damaged the mid-range. And these are unobtainium. You can't get them fixed. And if they get broken, they're brittle, and if they get jarred in any way, they will break. And once that happens, you're out of luck. So I would again always recommend going and picking them up yourself, if at all possible. So that's pretty much it. Surprises a little. I was a little more surprised, I think, about how hard it was to try and pick a winner, in any of these categories. The style part's a little easier, probably the easiest part. But after that, it's very interesting that they're such high-end, great speakers that it becomes, a bit challenging to say this one is, noticeably better than this one. So, but I tried to do that for you. Hope you appreciated that. If you liked this video, give us a thumbs up. If you don't want to miss that next video, hit subscribe. If you don't want to miss the next video, hit that notification bell. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.